Hello, and you are very welcome back to this third edition of the Irish Seahawks Show. Dara and Al here with you. Al, it's great to have you back on the show. How are you?
Good, I'm good. It's been a while. It's been a while since we came on. We said last time we were only gonna leave it a week or two, and it's been 4 or 5 weeks now. So good to be talking
Yeah, I,
Seahawks again.
I blame the Irish American football season for that. That's that's their fault. I've been focusing too much on that and focusing too much on our North Dublin Pirates and looking after stuff like that, looking after socials on that. It's been very busy, but it's draft season. It's the week before the draft. We are going to be talking Seahawks and draft, and we have no one, the very probably best Seahawks draft blog owner in this side of the Atlantic for sure. Probably the other side of the Atlantic too, I would argue. Rob Staton. Rob, it's great to have you on. How are you?
Very good. First, yeah, good to be here and excited. It's got a week to go in the draft, so it's always a good time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's like the draft season is always very exciting. And considering what the Seahawks did last year with their draft picks, like hitting on so many picks, and with the amount of picks that they have this year, it's possibly probably the most I've looked forward to a draft in all my time supporting NFL. What about yourselves?
Yeah, it's very exciting. Like, we've got 4 picks in the first 2 rounds. You know it's very exciting. Rather than when you do mock drafts and you've just got your own picks and your standard picks, and you think, oh, you could draft this guy there and this guy there. Like, to be able to sort of get a couple of those players instead of just one, which is what the Seahawks are going to get with 20 and 37, it's exciting. And this is the end of the Russell Wilson trade. Now, off the back of this draft, in 10 days' time, we will know what the Russell Wilson trade ended up being. We can reflect on the haul that the Seahawks got. We can map out the path that they're going to take as they try and become a championship caliber team again. So it's a very interesting, fascinating time, very exciting time, and I think also I'm just ready to see what they're going to do. So bring it on.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I'm really eager to just get it done though, because there's a lot of just crap I've seen about the draft, and it's just I'm ready to get it over with and see what we have and see where we're going. See if we're continuing from next year or from last year, if they're going to continue kind of best player available approach, or if they're going to regress to their kind of fit a square peg in a round hole, drafting more for need and reaching on players. So kind of anxiety and ready to get it done. Looking forward to it though.
Yeah, it's kind of become a very important draft for a number of reasons. Obviously, you want to continue on and build on the success that they had in the last draft, like I mentioned, and with the free agency acquisitions that they made in the offseason too. The most I think they've spent ever in the P and John era, and also the fact that there is this opportunity, especially in the NFC West this year, with the likes of the Rams, look like they're going through a rebuilding year. The Cardinals look like they are just in a complete dumpster fire at the moment. See, the 49ers are going to try and continue their success, and we still have question marks over their quarterback and what's going to happen there. But Rob, it's kind of like that. There's this golden opportunity here for the Seahawks to possibly take hold of the NFC West this season if they continue with a very good draft.
Yeah, there's certainly an opportunity to put themselves in a position to be a contender within the division in the NFC with a second consecutive really strong draft. It's not just the fact that they hit on the picks last year; it's the quantity of picks that they hit on, and they need that again. I still think that they're probably an off season away from putting the finishing touches to a championship roster. I think that what this needs to be is phase 2. And then in a year's time, when you get to free agency again and you get to your draft, that's where, like, okay, what are the finishing touch? What is that last position you take in the first round next year that's going to take you over the top? What is that? Those sort of 2 or 3 positions that you're going to really build towards to put you in a strong position. Because the Niners aren't going to go anywhere from last year. They have got a fantastic defense. They still have Kyle Shanahan. Their key players are still in a prime age. the one question mark for the Niners is who's going to be playing quarterback for them in the fall. Is it going to be Brock Purdy? Is he going to be back? How is he going to recover from this injury? Is he as good as the Niners clearly think he is, given that they're flirting with the idea of trading Trey Lance, so they spent so much on to trade up and get after just a couple of years? Is Sam Darnold capable of leading that team if Purdy's not ready to go? There's a lot of question marks there. I still think that there's a ways to go to jump ahead of the Niners. But look, the Seahawks can be competitive again. And I just hope that the fans are realistic this year, and we don't expect 12 wins or anything like that. We just expect, if I would even take, they won 9 games last season. I'd even take a regression there to 7 or 8 wins, as long as you finish the season feeling like they're on the right track. The right moves have been made. We can see progress here. The roster's coming together. And now it's just about one more off season to get to where they need to be a contender.
Yeah, I agree. We're in a really good position to start the off season. We have 10 draft picks, I think it is. The Cardinals and the Rams they're a non-factor this year. I don't think they'll do anything. The 49ers, it's funny. I feel strange about the 49ers. It's just the quarterback position. They can have the best defense and they have some really good players in the offense, but without that guy under center, they're talking about trading Trey Lance. Is Brock Purdy going to be back? And then Sam Darnold. I'm not totally convinced that they're going to repeat last year. But we'll see. As far as I lost my train of thought, sorry. I had a point there to make. I'll remember it, or I'll get back to it if I remember it.
It's grand. We'll circle back. It's fine. We'll get into some draft talk, and I want to talk a little bit about the draft as a whole, because it's great, Rob, that we have yourself on as someone from the UK on this side of the Atlantic. And the one criticism I have about the draft is night one, and the fact that there's 32 picks, 31 this year, obviously with Miami forfeiting there, takes 4 hours to do night one. 4 hours for night one, doesn't end till about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And then when you get to day 2 and day 3, they're just bashing out the picks all day, and you just see it as like a ticker at the bottom. They don't even mention it, like Rich Eisen may do on a network, saying, "Oh, the Seahawks just drafted, and they drafted someone from Alabama at pick 151." Yeah, very good. And so we'll get back to talking about night one and what they're going to do from night one and stuff. But Rob, what are your thoughts on the draft weekend as a whole, especially like I said, with night one taking so long and depriving us of our much needed sleep?
Yeah, it's a long night. I did 2018. I watched the draft in America. I was on a holiday in America, so I was able to watch it at a reasonable hour. And I must admit that's my favorite draft, because I was just basically finished at about 11 o'clock. And that was grand. It is a long night, and then immediately after the draft finishes, I will do like a big article on reflecting on it. I will do a live stream. I think last year I went to bed at something like 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. I've been stayed up all night. I book a couple of days off work to do it. By the end of the draft, it's exhausting. I am completely exhausted. The late nights, like you say, that the third day of the draft kind of frustrates me a little bit, because it's almost like the only people surely watching this are the absolute geeks like myself who want to hear analysis on that guy that's been taken in the 5th round. But they almost cater for the people who long since tuned out. The casual fan who is tuning in, they'll interview like a series of coaches or players or even players who've been drafted, or just random celebrities or whatever, or they'll start cracking jokes on day 3 and trying to have forced banter on the panel. I kind of think, well, look, if it's round 6, the only people who are with you right now are the people who want to hear they want to hear Mel Kiper describe this Bowling Green defensive lineman that no one's ever heard of. So that always kind of frustrates me a little bit, but it's a long night. But for me, it's like Christmas. I put so much work into this thing over the last 12 months that when it actually comes down to it, it's over in a flash, and then you've got kind of like nothing if you're an NFL fan for 2 months. So I do try and savor it.
Yeah, I don't tend to stay up for it myself. I have to be up nice and early in the morning every day for work. So I generally tend to not to. Maybe the first few picks and then I'll go to bed. But I'm tempted this year to stay up for at least the first 2 days. We'll see.
Well, that's it. It ends on Saturday, so you wouldn't have to stay up late. You'd be off the Sunday, surely.
I'll be off Sunday, all right. Saturday and Sunday I'll be off, but it's the first day that.
It's the first day that's tough. I know. I've had to book the day off work myself.
Who needs sleep
for it too? Exactly. Well, as you get older, you definitely try and get as much as you can. You never know. Look, let's talk about the draft, and let's sort of start in the first round. Of course, the Seahawks do have those 2 first-round picks, number 5 and number 20. The consensus is that at least 3 quarterbacks will be gone by the time Seattle are picking at 5. Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, and then probably either Will Levis or Anthony Richardson. Rob, I heard you on the Cigar Thoughts podcast this week, and you believe that Will Levis has a really high ceiling, and that you would take him at 5 if he was available. If he isn't, and Anthony Richardson is the one who's available, do you still pick a quarterback at number 5, or are you moving off and looking at one of the defenders?
No, I think Anthony Richardson's a fantastic talent. I actually think for the Seahawks, it's going to come down to Will Anderson and whether he's still there at number 5. And there's a lot of mixed stuff out there. This has been the most difficult to project top 5 in a number of years. It felt fairly simple for a while. Like you were going to have either Young or Stroud as number 1, and then the other one would go number 2. The Cardinals would either trade down, and that would mean somebody trading up for a quarterback, or they would take Will Anderson, and then the Colts were going to take a quarterback, and then it'd leave number 5 for the Seahawks, and they could pick with whoever's left. But it's got so much more confusing now because there's talk that Will Anderson might go 2nd or Tyree Wilson might go 2nd, that the Cardinals are going to find it hard to trade down, so they would take the other defender. You've got the Colts. All of a sudden, Will Levis is like favorite to be the 2nd quarterback taken, because I think that, and obviously the markets think this as well, that the Colts have zoned in on him because of his readiness to start. So you could end up with a situation where Stroud's there at 5, Richardson's there at 5. I personally don't think that Jalen Carter's going to be picked by the Seahawks. I've written a lot about why I think that. But for me, I think it's going to come down to, is Will Anderson there? If he is, they may well just take him at 5. If Anderson's gone and Anthony Richardson's there, I think they will take Anthony Richardson.
What have you made of the reports of recent days of CJ Stroud dropping in a lot of GM's eyes? He seemed for a long time, especially after the combine, that he was nailed on to be number 1. Now that thought has moved over to Bryce Young, especially now that he's not taking any more visits. But surely if Stroud is there at 5, you would take him, and like he would be in a perfect situation surely at Seattle to maybe even sit for a year behind Geno and just learn the trade a little.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with what you've said there. I'm a little bit confused by what's going on. You just have to sort of piece it together. Now, during the actual college season, I was quite critical of CJ Stroud for the first 5-6 games. I didn't think he was showing enough progress. The concerns that he plays in a very QB-friendly scheme in Ohio State, where he doesn't have to make his reads. He just looks to the sideline and they tell him what to do and he goes out there and does it. And he also has the benefit of playing with Marvin Harrison Jr., 2 very talented offensive tackles who could both be first-round picks. He has other first-round picks at receiver. He's got 5-star running backs. He's got a defense that can support him very, very well. You know, there's the environment there to just say, look, we're going to tell you what to do. Just go and throw it to Marvin Harrison Jr. in this spot. Is that's not translatable to the NFL. And what you're actually sort of seeing were a number of mistakes. His intermediate accuracy wasn't very good. His accuracy downfield was very, very good. And then as the season went on and people started to talk about those things, I thought the reaction went a bit over the top, and people started, like, there was one game, I can't remember where it was, I think it was against Northwestern, where the wind was atrocious at Ohio State. You couldn't throw the football. People were very critical of his performance, but he was basically playing in a hurricane. And I thought he actually played quite well in that game, all considered with the conditions. So I think people started to go a bit over the top in terms of criticizing him. Then we had the Georgia game where he basically looked like Patrick Mahomes against the best team in college football, and that kind of changed people's opinions. Now, when I look at that game, I'm big on projecting what a player can be, not what he can't be. And when I see that performance, I'm thinking, right, if I'm a GM, I'm taking that guy, and then I turn to my coaches and say, I want that. It's your job, your coaches, get me that. Turn that we see against Georgia into an NFL quarterback, and I'm taking the guy. But you know, you're hearing stuff about this. I don't know if you've heard about this S2 test. It's kind of replaced the Wonderlic, which is some way of checking the way that a quarterback like reads certain situations and the reaction times and stuff like that. Apparently, he didn't do that well in that test, and Richardson, Levis, and Young did very, very well. So that might be one reason why teams are selling him. There's talk that he's difficult to coach, that he's just a different guy. So I don't know. It's hard to piece it all together. I'm a little bit baffled. Part of me thinks someone's going to trade up and take the guy at 2 or 3 anyway. But increasingly, it sounds like he might be there at number 5 if the Seahawks want to take him. Well, I just wonder whether the Seahawks, if they had to choose between Anthony Richardson's insane upside and CJ Stroud, whether that might be a harder conversation than people realize.
And sticking on quarterbacks, if they don't take one at 5 or at 20, what's your opinion on the likes of Hendon Hooker, who of course is injured at the moment, and maybe even later, like Dorian Thompson-Robinson? If they were to kind of wait and then take one of those guys later, what do you think of those guys?
So, I mean, there are things to like about Hooker. He's athletic. He's got big hands. He had a great throw against LSU down the field, so he can throw with accuracy. He's shown little hints of that. I think the problem with him is, again, it's the scheme. It's a wide open scheme. It's a half field read scheme. They spread things out so much at Tennessee in a way that you're not allowed to per the rules in the NFL. And then he was throwing to guys that were wide open down the field. So it's hard to judge him. The counter argument to that is people say, look, he's got the work ethic, the mentality, the application in his career that he will just be able to pick up the pro game and he will excel. And people are projecting him to be very well. I think that the Hooker is not. I'm not comparing him to Andy Dalton. I think that Andy Dalton at his best is kind of like Hendon Hooker's ceiling. And Dalton was a decent player for a few years. He never quite elevated Cincinnati, though, and he was eminently replaceable after a few years as well. And I think that's kind of Hooker's ceiling. I thoroughly enjoyed watching DTR for UCLA over the last couple of years. It was always an exciting watch, and I do like him. He's 190 pounds, though, 6'4", 190 pounds. He has got a great arm. He is very athletic. He's very creative. He's a fun player to watch. I just don't know where you take that guy. You know, at his size, I think I've got him graded in round 4. I spoke to a former GM a few weeks ago who said you've basically got the top 4, Hendon Hooker, and then a bunch of 6, 7 rounders. So I don't know how people are going to view him and his size. For me, I think if you're not going to take one of the top 4, I'm probably not going to take one.
Mm-hmm. I think with Hooker, especially, obviously, age and injury history is a big thing that you're going to have to consider before even touching him there a little bit with that for sure. But like that, you mentioned about Jalen Carter and or Will Anderson. Is there any sort of appetite or interest with that number 5? Or look, listen, let's not take the trade back option off the table here with number 5 as well. But if there was a trade back option with a Tennessee or a Falcons or something like that, what would you feel about the other sort of perceived top defenders in the draft, the likes of you mentioned Jalen Carter, but Tyree Wilson. Even if you want to have a look at the cornerbacks of Witherspoon or Gonzalez.
Well, I mean, I like Devon Witherspoon. I think he's a really fun player to watch. He's probably the most violent player in the draft. He hits like an absolute hammer. He's not a big guy. I'm a little bit suspicious that 4.4 40 time. I think he's more of a 4.5. I like him. He's shown a lot of grit. He's come up from his career trajectory was, he was a no-star recruit. He went the JUCO route. He's ended up at Illinois. He competed very, very well there. He had a fantastic PFF grade. You watch the tape from last year. He looks very, very good. His read and react is fantastic. I mentioned he's a very, very good tackler, very tough tackler. I think he's well worth in this draft class a top 12 pick, and I think he probably will. I'm not sure he'll get past Detroit, quite frankly, at number 6. I think they're probably quite set on him. So I like him a lot. I just don't think that's the pick for the Seahawks right now. I think I just don't see that as for me, this is a team that it's a deep cornerback draft. You've just found a star in the 5th round last year. I think there's alternatives on the quarterback on the D line that I would take ahead. I'm not a massive Tyree Wilson guy. If he was there like in the mid-teens, I'd be very interested. I think there's perhaps people have got a bit over the top in analysing him. I don't think he has much of an edge rush factor. I'm not personally interested in trading down. I think there's very limited value at the top of this draft. And I think if you trade out the top 5, you're actually trading out to where the value is. And look, if someone offered you a Trey Lance type deal, like 2 extra first-round picks and a second or something like that, then you have to consider it. But assuming that no one's going to offer that to move up to number 5, I'd rather just stick and pick. I think you can get, like I say, one of Anderson or one of these very talented quarterbacks. That's either a pass rusher who can help set your culture, or a quarterback for the long term. I think those are 2 really valuable things to have. I wouldn't want to trade down with Tennessee to give them the benefit of a long-term future at quarterback, just so you can get a few more picks. And Seattle's got 10 picks. Like how many do you need? Like you move down, so I'll get another second rounder. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, but eventually you've got to add some talent to this team. The one thing the Seahawks haven't got are superstar players. They've got good players, but they don't have top 5 at position players. They've got to find some of those if they're going to be a championship team. And whether that's a quarterback or pass rusher, they've got to try and find them. Having a top 5 pick's a way to do it.
Yeah, and I agree with you with the cornerback option. I don't feel that using such a high pick that fingers crossed they'll never have again on a cornerback when you have Tariq Woolen, like you mentioned. And also, like I still personally, I don't know if it's foolish hope, but I still have hope that Trey Brown is going to come back and come good this year as well. He showed some really good glimpses before his injury. So hopefully they can do something there with that. But sorry, Ali, I think you had a question there next.
No, Grant. So we talked there about the number 5 pick and what we would do, and you're not really interested in trading out there. But right now, the Seahawks only have 52 players under contract. That's a long way away from their 90 that we'd be expecting before their cuts. Later on, from 20 onwards, what do you think the chances are of them, Pete and John, trying to trade out of that maybe? Or do you think they're going to stick and kind of get a bunch of UDFAs and some more free agents?
Yeah, I think there's a good chance they'll trade down from 20. I think there seems to be that's the common thought process here, that they will trade down probably into the mid-20s or late 20s. And I think what you're going to see, this will be my prediction. I'm going to put a mock draft out today, and this is what I've been projecting for a few weeks now, is that the New York, Buffalo, Baltimore, Minnesota teams, they're very possibly going to take a receiver. I don't think any are going to go off the board in the top 20. So I think somebody will potentially try and trade up to get the top one, whether that's Jackson Smith and Jigba or somebody else. And the Seahawks will be able to move down. And, a lot of the talk is that they could draft a center in the late first. I think especially if you've taken a quarterback with your top pick, alternatively, that could be an area where you get a good defensive player at the end of round 1. So I think there's a very good chance that they will trade down from 20 and get another pick, get a 3rd round or something like that, maybe a bit of extra. But then how they fill their roster out, that's a great question. I mean, part of me wonders if they'll draft a tight end early so that they can trade Noah Fant and get $6.5 million to bring in some of these cheap veterans on, very minimal contracts. Rather than pay Noah Fant $6.5 million, could you pay 5 players $1 million, to get some veteran presence in there and like prove it kind of contracts? They are going to have to sign a lot of undrafted free agents. They're going to have to create some space to sign some other guys. They're going to have to do that. But they've kind of made the bed, by going after Draymond Jones and Jaron Reed and Bobby Wagner. They are going to have a lot of probably undrafted free agents filling out that 90-man roster. The good thing is you only have to have 52 at the end, so 53. So they can take a bunch of UDFAs into camp, and if none of them are any good, they can move them on.
Yeah, and I was going to ask then, because you mentioned about sort of tight ends and trading back, but looking at that sort of the first pick in the second round, the 37th pick, there is a lot of decent potential defenders. I'm looking at the likes, if they're available, like BJ Ojulari, Mazzy Smith is possibly could be there. McDonald might be there too. Like, if there is some potential there for some decent defensive players, if it is in fact that they don't use that number 5 pick on a defender, which I think, obviously the fan base is always split whether you want a defender or a quarterback in that number 5.
Yeah, I think this is the problem that we've had with this sort of draft process, is people have just decided that number 5, like, it's almost like the only pick that Seahawks have. Like, if you don't take the player that I want, then chaos reigns. Like, I've always been in the camp that I'm comfortable with a defensive lineman or a quarterback. And, 2 of my first 3 mock drafts, I had Jalen Carter with the Seahawks. It's only because, more information has emerged and I've been able to ask certain people about certain things and learn certain things myself. And there's been various other reports about Jalen Carter that have emerged now that I've adapted my opinion. But I've always been very open to defensive line or quarterback. And, there are a lot of fans out there who would rather jump off a bridge than draft a quarterback. And I don't really understand that thought process, because you if you wanted to, you could spend 20 and 37 on a defender and you could get, let's just be honest here, Will McDonald's a better edge rusher than Will Anderson. Like, Will Anderson can't bend the arc in the way that Will McDonald can. Anderson does a lot of things better than McDonald. And he's younger and he's more forceful against the run and great character guy. But Will McDonald bends the arc better. So if you want, purely from a pass rushing, that quickness, that elite speed, that bend, McDonald's a superior edge rusher in that regard. And you could get him at 20 or maybe even 37. You can get a Kalijah Kancey, who, for all the talking about people about Jalen Carter this, Jalen Carter that, well, go and watch Kalijah Kancey. That guy, there are no concerns there. He is such a dynamic interior rusher. And the comparison, no one will ever be Aaron Donald, but this guy's probably like as close as you're ever going to get. So, this idea that if you do draft a quarterback early, then that's it. The defense is going to be terrible. You could take an edge rusher and a defensive tackle with your next 2 picks, and they might end up being better than Will Anderson. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. And then what have you got? You've got a blossoming defense. You've got a quarterback of the future. Who could be angry with that? I mean, for me, that just feels like a reasonable plan amongst several reasonable plans.
Yeah. Sorry, Al, were you going to say something there?
No. Well, actually, to kind of take it off a little bit, the linebackers. So we've gotten a little bit more depth at linebacker. We signed Devin Bush. We brought Bobby Wagner back. But I think we're probably still going to have to get a couple of players in there, given the uncertainty with Devin Bush. And while Pete said the other day that they're aiming to have Brooks back for camp, which would be amazing, I don't think that's going to happen. So where do you have them in regards to linebackers? Do you have them taking the likes of maybe Trent Simpson or Jack Campbell early? or do you think they're going to wait and take one of the later guys if maybe Henley falls or if they have Ivan Pace later on? Do you think they're going to take a couple of linebackers, or do they kind of stick with D-line and maybe a few offensive guys?
I think it's a bad linebacker draft, and I think that's the reason why they've signed Wagner and Bush, because they know that they can't rely on these guys. I think Trenton Simpson's more of an athlete than a linebacker at this point. Bruce Sanders has got some really nice plays, but he's got a huge missed tackle percentage. I think Jack Campbell has become one of the most overrated players in the class. I keep seeing Day and Henley, being projected very, very early. I think Chris Sims has named him his best linebacker in this draft. Perhaps speaks volumes to the state of the class, quite frankly. I think he's a 4th round pick. If they're going to take somebody, I think it's probably like round 3 at the absolute earliest. Pete Carroll, Alabama's pro day, watched the entire session that Henry To'oTo'o had. So, like, for that reason alone, I'm kind of like, that, why would he do that? I'm kind of intrigued by that. Could they take somebody like that in the middle rounds? Potentially. I'm a big fan of the linebacker who perhaps intrigues me the most is Dorian Williams at Tulsa. He's very violent. I just think if they're going to do something like this, the other thing is that they've tended to like really great athletes at linebacker or guys who run a great short shuttle. And there are none of them. There are none of the linebackers have run a 4.1, which is what Cody Barton ran, and Ben Burke-Irvin, I think, was even faster. So there's not an elite, exceptional short shuttle amongst this group. There are some good athletes, but not elite athletes. So I think there's a decent chance that with the signing of Bush and Wagner, they've kind of just pushed this one down the line.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I like the looks of Dorian Williams as well as a possible late round. I was also looking at Noah Sewell a little bit too, but again, they're late round guys. They're guys that maybe, especially with Bobby and Devin Bush there, and they can hopefully get a guy in a late round and have him sit, maybe just be a special teamer for the most part, and have him learn under Bobby for a year or so before they really start getting meaningful first team reps.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's probably, if they're going to take somebody, it's probably somebody who can play special teams more than anything, and then sort of develop into a role. It's just hard. It's not a great linebacker class at all, and because they have depth needs on the defensive line, offensive line. They probably need to add another receiver at some point. The tight end position that will out of contract next year, apart from Disley, and who knows what his future is. They need more running backs. I just get the sense that when it actually comes to making a pick, is the linebacker ever going to be like the top player on the board, or is there going to be another position that they think, yeah, do you know what, we're going to go for that instead?
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about 2 more positions on the offense there. First of all, I want to talk running back. Obviously, we're pretty set with Ken Walker as the starting running back this coming year, but just myself personally, I think using a day 3 pick on getting a backup running back for him, it would be important. I don't know, looking at the Rashad Penny contract, I don't know if the Seahawks were ever serious about bringing him back. But looking at the likes of maybe a Tank Bugsby, or if he's available, or even an Evan Hull from Northwestern, if those guys are available, they're sort of ones that you can maybe be decent backups to Ken Walker. Have you seen any running backs in the later rounds that you like the look of that the Seahawks could possibly look at?
Well, it's a reasonably deep class. Later rounds, it gets to a point where, like, who's going to be there? Which players are going to last? The one name that I really like in terms of like the middle rounds, or maybe even round 2, I think he might be a day 2 pick actually, is Israel Abanikanda from Pittsburgh. It's so explosive, so quick, kind of got the size that they love in Seattle. I think he is of great interest. If he somehow lasted to round 3, I'd be all over that. Chris Rodriguez at Kentucky, I interviewed him a couple of weeks ago. He's mirrored his game on Marshawn Lynch, and he's got that same similar running style. So I think if he was available later on, I'd consider that. Chase Brown, incredibly athletic and tough and physical at Illinois. You mentioned Tank Bigsby. I like the way that he runs. He's tough to bring down. When you get into sort of that day 3 area, the options tend to run out quite quickly. I think that's where Roshan Johnson will go early round 4. I don't know whether they'd take someone like Juice Vaughan because of his size. They have been quite specific in that. So I do think the depth runs out. Eric Gray, you mentioned Evan Hull. People like that could be an option, but they do need a dynamic number 2. And I just wonder, it might annoy a lot of Seahawks fans, but I just wonder if they might take one a little bit earlier than people think.
I would like to see that for the content. That would be very funny. If they took one in like 2nd or 3rd round and people lost their minds, I would like that.
Yeah.
And they need one as well. I mean,
they do.
Walker and Dallas, they're not enough. You have to have some more depth there. So they're going to take a running back. And
I mean, if Jahmyr Gibbs was there at 37, it'd be really difficult to say no. And he can play slot receiver and everything like that. So, he's more than just, and he can return kicks. So he's not somebody who is just a running back. And he is a 1st-round player. If he lasts to 37, that's basically Ken Walker, but this year's version of it. So you would have to consider that. But it depends how they want to do this. Are they generally going to go best player available, or are they going to, pick for needs?
Does it also depend on what they're going to do with, say, the likes of Derek Young? We saw him take a few snaps in the backfield last year and sort of trying to give him that Deebo Samuel role. So I guess if he's going to get more touches in maybe a backup role to Walker, maybe they can use a much later round pick like you mentioned. But if not, then like you said, a 2nd, early, maybe late 2nd, 3rd round possibly on getting a guy, or if you want to say use that 37th pick.
Yeah, possibly so.
Wide receiver. You mentioned that you don't fancy a wide receiver going in the top 20. A few mocks have put the Seahawks taking a wide receiver at 20. Smith-Njigba is the name that I see featured prominently. But from reading your blog, and especially you mentioned it on with Jackson there the other day too, that you like the look of a different wide receiver.
Yeah, I think Smith-Njigba is. I think he's too slow for the Seahawks. They like sudden receivers. They want that speed. They want that 4.4 speed. They've just got a history of going in that direction. So I'm not sure that Smith-Njigba will be. And I don't think they're going to take a receiver in the 1st round. That's going to become a trendy pick for the Seahawks, their 2nd 1st-round pick. A lot of the national mocks are doing that. I just don't see it. The guys that I like, Josh Downs is my number 1 receiver for a start. And I think he compares very well to Tyler Lockett. He's very mature as well. His uncle is Dre Bly. I think he's an amazing little player, and I think he's well worth a top 35 pick. And then the second guy I really like is Jonathan Mingo. He's my 2nd receiver on the board. He's like a quick version of Anquan Boldin. He's incredibly big, physical, blocks well in the running game, can get downfield, take the top off a defense, can do all of the short stuff. He can be a big slot. He can play outside. Great personality. So yeah, I think if I would not be surprised at all if the Seahawks do take another receiver, whether they target Jonathan Mingo.
I'm not really pushed on a running back or a wide receiver either way. I think it would be a nice pick. I think you need some depth there. And especially if Lockett goes down again for however long that might be. But I think there are bigger needs. I think they'll probably go defense, defensive line probably with number 20. I'd be surprised to see a run or a wide receiver there.
All right. Well, look, listen, we're gonna look to wrap up things here. Robert, you've been really good with your time. We're really thankful that you've been able to come on and chat some draft with us. But before we do let you go, we mentioned it a little bit about at the start about expectations for the coming year, and is there a certain area? I know of the team that you're looking forward to seeing what progress they've made from last season?
I'm looking forward to seeing the defense in general, because it's been a bit of a shambles for a few years now, and I'm eager to see some improvement there. I'll tell you what I'm more than eager to see is the defense not start the year terribly. Like, it's for the last few seasons, it feels like it takes them 5 games to get going. I'd like to see a defense that doesn't have to be flawless in week 1. I'd like to see it not be useless. Like they give up a lot of yards and a lot of points early in seasons, and everything seems to be discombobulated, and then they kind of make a turn, and then the last couple of years they took a turn and then it's gone back again and regressed. I'd like to see a more rounded defense moving forward, but when I actually look at the team right now, I don't really know how they're going to achieve that. I don't, bringing Bobby Wagner back and signing Draymond Jones and Jaron Reed's fine, but it feels like there's a ton of work to do there, and I'm not sure that rookies alone are going to enable them to do that. So I'm a little bit worried about the defense. And it might be overly reliant on young players, and that for me could be a recipe for disaster, in players not knowing where they need to be, looking after their gaps, understanding the scheme. So that worries me a little bit. So I think generally the defense is the thing that I'm sort of eager to see. I've got no doubt, no qualm that Gino will be Gino, DK will be DK, Tyler Lockett will be Tyler Lockett. The 2 tackles will hopefully take a step forward. It's really about how is that defense going to go, because I think people are just saying the Seahawks can draft a few players and they'll be grand. It doesn't work like that, I'm afraid. Especially if these rookies are going to play a prominent role. So I'm a bit concerned about this defense, and I'm eager to see it.
Yeah, totally. And one last question. We're getting the throwback unis this year, which is fantastic news. Who are you getting on the back of yours?
That's a good question, that. Does it have to be a current player, or can it be a tribute?
If you want to do tribute, you can do tribute, or even if you want to wait and see who they draft, if you can do that too.
Well, the 2 players that will always be my favorite players are Marshawn and Cam Chancellor. I like to see, more than anything, I want to see the Seahawks kick the crap out of other teams. And, I just the tone and the attitude and everything that Cam and Marshawn brought is what I want to see. And if I was ever to get a jersey and could pick anything, it'd probably be one of those 2 guys, as name and number, just because I love them as players. And for me, I think both deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. And certainly the sooner they can get them in the Ring of Honor in Seattle, the better, as far as I'm concerned. They are the LOB. People like Sherman, Earl, of course, huge parts of it. But there's no LOB without Marshawn and Cam. So that's just that. In terms of current players, who's my favorite player at the minute? Do you know what? I'd have Cade Johnson on the back. Purely for the reason that I interviewed him and somehow, some way recognised, remembered that I'd interviewed him when he was at college, when we were in Munich, and he came and shook my hand, and I really appreciated that. It made my day. So, Cade Johnson.
Perfect. And it was actually great to see Cade Johnson get involved a lot more in the offense towards the end of last season too. Hopefully he can make a push on and get involved.
Wide receiver 3.
This it. If they need him, he's there for sure. He's there for sure. But look, listen, Rob, like I mentioned, it's been fantastic to speak to you ahead of the draft. We are really looking forward to it, despite the late hours that we're going to have to put in just to watch it and see what's going on. Before we do let you go, if anyone is interested in reading your stuff, where can they find it?
SeahawksDraftBlog.com, or check out the YouTube channel, which is pretty active, Rob Staton Football. But if you type in Rob Staton, you'll probably find the videos. And on Twitter, at Rob Staton, Staton. And as long as you are okay with day job tweets, which are probably about 50%, which is English football, then give us a follow on there as well.
Excellent stuff. Excellent stuff. Like I said, that's where we're going to wrap up this edition. We hope you enjoy the draft next week, Rob, and I'm sure we'll be in contact and chatting at some stage over the off season, if not during the year.
Thanks, guys. Anytime.
Al, as always, thank you.
Thanks very much. It was fun to talk Seahawks again. Hopefully, let's do it
Exactly.
a lot sooner this time.
Well, we will be. We'll be back the week after the draft to review all those picks and see what happens and route our map to the Super Bowl in Las Vegas next year, where I'll be there to watch it for sure. But before we go, one last thing as well, make sure you're following us on Instagram and Twitter at UnderCenterPod. That's where you'll find us. If you are watching us here on YouTube and you haven't already, like this video and subscribe to the channel and comment and let us know who are they taking with that number 5 pick. We'd love to hear from you too. But until next time, stay safe and we'll see you soon.